Hey everybody, and welcome to another Dorico video. This time we're going to be talking about some of the playback features, specifically some of the new ones here in Dorico Pro 6. They've added some new great features to the playback engine to make it so that your music sounds even more natural and performance ready. And I will say, as a composer, I don't really send out my music with MIDI realizations directly from Dorico, but what I do a lot of is using this to double check how it's going to sound when real people interpret it. So when I put a marcato on a note, I want to know it sounds short and accented, so I feel like that was the right marking. So I find these to be really helpful features to make sure my music sounds as good as it can when I get it out there into the real world, and that's why these playback features are so darn important. So here we go with playback features here in Dorico Pro 6. Okay, here we are with one of my big band tunes entitled Studio Time. I've been working on this and I'm getting it ready for publication. And so I've been working on the playback so I can have a really nice MIDI realization to share with people before they perform it, since I haven't had a chance to record this with real musicians yet. So I want to show you a couple of the working features here in Dorico around playback, because again, I use this playback to double check that what I'm doing as a composer really is compatible with my vision as an artist. And so getting the notation right to me not only means getting the right articulations and everything, but making it sound really good so that if somebody says, well, how does it go? I can hit the MIDI realization and they get a pretty darn good idea of how it's going to sound. So the first thing to share with you is obviously the easy stuff, like playback. If you hit the space bar, Dorico will start playing, and it's going to start playing it wherever you left off the playback last. And if you hit spacebar again, it's going to stop. Now up here on the screen in the upper right hand corner, we have our most basic controls. We have the rewind to beginning of flow. We have the new cycle feature, which we'll talk about in a minute. We have play, and we have basic record, as well as options like clicking metronome while doing playback, as well as fixed versus dynamic tempos, which again, we'll talk about in a minute. So the most important thing I want to share is there's a whole lot more to the playback than what you see up here in the upper right. The first and most important I have is the P key. Now the P key allows us to play from anywhere in the piece of music by simply highlighting something. So if I highlight this rest here at the beginning of this trumpet part, Dorico will start playback of all the parts from that point forward. Now again, I can hit stop with the space bar, but let's say I wanted to make a change to a note, say this one right here, and turn it into a C, and then if I hit shift space bar, it will actually start playing back from where we started just a moment ago. So that can be a really handy tool if you're going through and you're trying to do some edits on your part and you want to just kind of quickly play back from where you just started. So again, if I highlight something and hit P, that's where the playhead will start. I can stop it with spacebar, and then if I hit shift space, then it will start playback where I just was, which is a really handy feature. Now that P key has another really powerful tool, which is if I highlight, say, all the trumpet parts here, when I hit the P key to play, it's not only going to start at the beginning of what I highlighted, but it's only going to play the staves that I have highlighted. So in this case, it's going to play the 4 trumpet parts only. Now this is a great time saver when you're wanting to test, like for example, a piano voicing or just your trombones or just your saxes, because you can quickly highlight whatever it is you want to hear and hit play. And if I just wanted to hear one specific part, if I was to highlight more than just one note, the playback will start where I started the selection, but it'll only play just that one stave. So again, that P command is so terribly important, and I use it all of the time when I'm in Dorico. And I've been tempted to change the shortcut, but I kind of like to keep the default shortcuts the way they are, so that every time I talk to somebody in a Dorico lesson or I'm working with somebody, we all understand how to get to these shortcuts the same way. Now, there's a couple of other things I want to show you here about the playback tools. One of the first ones is right here next to the playback controls, we have these dots. And if I click on it, it'll bring out the transport control, which gives me access to a few of these other options with a mouse click if I need it. So that's just a kind of a handy feature. There's also this little speaker here, which is called Audio Scrub, which is also Shift-Z on the keyboard. And when that's on, you can hear it plays back anything that I highlight with the playhead, which is that big green bar. Now, that's not real great about a lot of, when I'm going over a lot of short notes, but say if I wanted to hear this chord, see now it's playing back the entire chord, and I can really get a feel for how that one voicing sounds. So it's a really handy tool every so often. I don't use it very much, but once in a while it's just the perfect tool. The other thing you can do here is when we set a tempo in Dorico, say this one here that says pop rock, that tempo marking includes this Q equal, Q being quarter note, E for eighth note, and so on and so forth. That will actually set the playback tempo of Dorico. But let's say I just wanted to play it faster for some reason, because I just needed to know how some passage sounded. If I come up here to the tempo tool and I click on the quarter note, you'll see that it takes away the blue highlight, and now it says equal. And what this does is it allows me to set an actual playback tempo numerically, and then if I hit play, you can see that it overwrites whatever is in the score for playback. Now, I don't use this feature a lot either, but again, once in a while, I just want to go through and get some things done. So I use that option fairly frequently, and like I said, that's a great one. There's also a couple of different options when it comes to recording in Dorico if you're going to use your MIDI keyboard. The first one, which is under the play menu, it's the first one, Command R for record. It's going to start recording wherever we have highlighted on whatever stave we have highlighted. So if I wanted to record in the tenor part, I would just go ahead and highlight that, hit R, and you'll see the playhead turns red, and then I can put in a part. And there it goes, it notated my part for me. Now Dorico is smart, and under the preferences options, you can tell it what to listen for, because it can listen for slurs and articulations and other things. And sometimes you might not be interested in that, but sometimes you are. So what Dorico hears while you're actually MIDI inputting is under the Dorico preferences, and then when it brings up the menu under play, you'll see MIDI input devices. And you'll see that there's a quantization, meaning what's the smallest note value that Dorico will accept. It asks, do you want to detect triplets and other things? And do you want to detect grace notes, fill notes, and do you want to record any of these items? Meaning, do you want to record the length, any volume or pitch control bending I'm doing on my keyboard? Now, I'm a terrible keyboard player, so I typically want to have virtually none of this stuff inputted with my Dorico recording, because I basically am just trying to input notes a little bit quicker. But for some of you who are better piano players than me, you might actually want to preserve some of these great playback things, like your note velocities and note positions and other things like that. It can detect trills and slurs and some other things. But again, I'm a terrible piano player, so I don't really want any of that junk. So I'm going to go ahead and delete all of that stuff. Now, also under the play menu, you can retrospectively record. And if you click this, you'll see what it does is it actually records the thing that you last played, and you can see it pulls back whatever the last thing I did under the record feature was. So in addition to these playback controls, we also have this new option which is called cycle. And the cycle record, when you click on it, brings up these little purple boxes. And so the purple box with the left-facing arrow is the right boundary, aka where it's going to stop. And then the left-facing duration, which is the arrow that's pointing inward to the right, that's where it's going to begin. So if I put my cycle like this, highlight anything within the cycle and hit play, you'll see it's just going to loop these 2 bars over and over and over again. Now the playhead seems to jump around a little bit while it's doing the playback, but you'll listen carefully. It's not playing back any of those extra bars where that playhead jumps to. It's just kind of a weird glitch in the visual of the playhead, but it is really playing back where I have highlighted. Now this can be a really handy feature if you just want to play back a certain section, keep editing, and then keep playing in that same location. I will say, however, if you highlight an area outside of your cycle and hit play, it will jump to that section and play. So it will not stop you from playing back anywhere else in the piece. It just means that if I play back in the middle of the cycle, it will keep it within that cycle. Now it's really easy to turn this off by going ahead and hitting the cycle button up there. And if you don't want to see those cycle markings, you can go under our view settings and I can just turn off my cycle locators and poof, they're gone. But if I want them back, that's easy to get back to them again. Now again, this feature only is in Dorico 6, so if you're a Dorico 5 user, you won't be able to use this cycle feature, so this might be a reason to get the upgrade, and so if you were looking for a good reason, that might be it. So if I highlight this section of notes, and I'm just going to zoom in a little bit, if I was to bring up my properties panel on the bottom and click over here on the key editor, you'll see that I have a couple of options that I can use to customize my playback. The first thing I could do is with these 8th notes selected, I could literally change how the music looks on the page. Are they 16th notes? Are they 8th notes? But if I click over here on this, the played durations, this allows me to actually change the literal length of the notes. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to click on this one note here, and I'm going to drag it out really, really long. Now you'll see, although it still looks like a 16th note, when I hit play, that note is actually going to be really, really long in its playback. So if you have a note where you really want to customize the playback, you really want it to work just the way you want it to be a certain length, this is a way that you can actually change the playback without affecting the notation, which is so amazing. I think this is a really powerful tool, especially if you do work in Dorico and then you transfer it over to a DAW like Cubase, for example, which can open up Dorico projects directly, which is a pretty great feature if you're a Cubase user. And this will allow you to make the MIDI playback a stronger representation of the music and the notation look exactly the way you want. Now, if you were to be on an instrument that had more than one voice, you can see that if I come to my guitar part, for example, I have more than one voice at play. And so you can actually make these edits on whichever voice you want to change. So if you have something in one of these other voices, you can actually make the changes independently and you won't get confused about which layer you're working on. Now, if you get partway through your project and you realize that these extra length notes and stuff really aren't doing what you want, if you highlight a group of notes, and if you were to go under the play menu, you can actually come down here to reset playback overrides. And if we do this, what it's going to do is it's actually going to take that note back to the length it should have been via our settings in the play menu, which I'll show you in a minute, and it removes all these extra play overrides that I had entered. Sometimes when I do a keyboard entry, I'll need to highlight everything and just go ahead and reset it all because I didn't play very well, and so the playback sounds atrocious even though the notation looks really good. You can also go in here under play and you can delete automations if you've done any kind of drawing in the velocity curves down here or anything, and you just want to get rid of all of that stuff. Do bear in mind, in the same way we can change note lengths, we can also independently edit the velocities of the notes without actually changing the dynamic. So even if I had the dynamic at mezzo forte and I just really want those notes to be louder, I could grab the velocity down here and make them significantly louder. And again, it does not affect the notation at all. Now, one last thing to point out that I think is important, and it does come in handy, is you'll notice that while I'm in this play durations mode, you see the darker bar under the note. That actually represents the notational value. Because see, if I switch back over to the notation view, you can see that the dark bar becomes the note box. And really what that does is it just proves to us, yes, each one of these is a 16th note long because I have my grid set at 8th notes. So if I set the grid at 16th notes, you can see each one of those dark boxes is a 16th note long. So again, it's just another nicety here in Dorico that allows us to see all aspects of our playback in one place. You can also get to the same menu in the play menu. So if you're doing a whole lot of editing to your playback options, you can see all of this in one place, which is again a great feature set. Now, in the playback menu here, we have a lot of different options that we can get to. We can show instruments, or we can show MIDI channels. We can show video if I had a video channel going. I can show unused channels, which I'm not using, so I don't need that. I can deactivate any muting or soloing I've done. And I can also add an FX channel, aka if I want to put reverb on my playback or something, that's what these are for. Right now, I'm using NotePerformer as my default playback engine. I think NotePerformer sounds a little more natural and a little more musical than a lot of the other instruments. But one of the drawbacks is I can't utilize all of the playback features here in Dorico because of the way NotePerformer works. For example, in NotePerformer, if I want to turn up an instrument, I actually have to go into NotePerformer's mixer. So what I would do is I would go under the mixer I'm trying to access, the instrument group, say NotePerformer 2, and I'd click on this E here, and then this would show me all the different instruments that are available for this particular spot. Now again, this is not as easy to get to as if we used some of the built-in Dorico instruments, but again, it's kind of a trade-off I'm willing to take, because for me, I really like the sound set of NotePerformer, and most of the time I don't go in here and mess with these settings, but there are a few of them that I use from time to time. So some of the things I'll do here is sometimes I'll add an FX channel to my mix window, and then if I come down here and I want to see more of my mixing window, I can raise the bar up, and then I can view some of these extra channels, like for example, the inputs and the outputs and the FX sends. So to do that, what I'm going to do here is if I highlight one of my instruments, say Alto Sax 2, I can come in here under the Insert Effects, and I can go ahead and I can add, say, a compressor. And when you add this to your playback, you can affect the sound directly on that channel. You can also go ahead and disable it if you don't need it, or if you go back up to this minus sign, that clears it out. I can also do a send, where I can send this off to another outside thing, like say a reverb unit. Now this is easier to demonstrate if I flip my instrument playback over to the built-in instruments in Dorico. So if I go under play and I come down to my playback template, I can choose the built-in instruments here in Dorico, and I'm going to hit apply, and because I added all the instruments in Dorico, it knows how to do all of these extra settings, and it's going to go ahead and convert everything over to my new instrument set. Now, if I want to access some of the more advanced features under the play menu, if I make my mix window just a whole lot taller, you can see that now I can get to my inserts, my EQ, and my sends on each one of these channels. I can also go in here and I can do traditional left-right panning, but if I click on this little live stage here, I can actually grab my various instruments and I can create a custom stage space. And so what this does is it allows me to put my instruments sort of as if they were sitting in a section, and then I will get a more natural panning. So now when I hit playback, it's actually going to pan all of these instruments to match up with those settings I just entered. Now let's say I felt like that was just a little bit dry, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to go into my reverbs here, and I'm going to disable the reverb that comes in Dorico, and I'm going to turn on one of my favorite reverbs, which is by SSL, which is this plate verb. I think it sounds really great, and I'm going to use its preset for this a dish best served warm. I think this one sounds really great. So now we can test this playback. So I can get some really natural, really great playback by simply just going in and adding all of these great features. And I can also do things like throw a bus compressor on the end if I want to get the playback to pop a little harder. And you can see there, Dorico already added one here. And maybe I just want to go ahead and crush it down a little bit, because right now it's not really adding a ton of makeup. So maybe I just go ahead and put on quite a bit more. So you can see there's a ton of customization here in the playback menu to get a lot of different sounds. And if you are using the built-in Dorico sounds, you have access to this whole list of things that you can do to really step up the playback. Now there's one last section I'd like to show you today in having to do with playback, and that is having to do with all of the options. So if we go under the playback options, under the library, there's a whole list of things that are in here. Now, I'll be honest with you, I don't touch most of these, but there's a couple I really would like to highlight. The first one is, if you're having trouble with the metronome, with recording and stuff, this is where you can find the volume of the metronome clicks. This is under velocity, so that's a 0 to 127 scale, 127 being as loud as possible. So if you're finding that the metronome is not quite loud enough, you could go ahead and turn it up here. You can also edit the number of bars it gives you as a lead-in, which I can find really handy sometimes. You can also turn on subdivision. So if you were recording at a really slow tempo, Dorico could click back eighth notes for you if you were playing, like, for example, a ballad or something at 50 beats a minute where the quarter note is kind of deceptively long. Under the Dynamics tab, these first things are pretty complex, and I don't really want to spend a lot of time on it because I doubt severely you're going to find much use in changing them. But I will point out that this default setting works pretty well, in my opinion, for making the dynamics sound the way they should. And you can read through this where it's pretty important to have this maximum and minimum set away, meaning you wouldn't want this set at 2, because that means pianissimo would be 0, aka no sound at all, which is not the way dynamics work. And then this dynamic curve is just showing us that, hey, the difference between piano and fortissimo is quite a large jump up in dynamic, but the difference between the almost loudest and loudest, not that big. And that's really the way that dynamics work in the real world, so I probably wouldn't mess with that. But in the comments, if you've found a custom setting that you think sounds a whole lot better, please feel free to share it with everybody watching the video. I also really like this humanize feature that Dorico has, and what it does is it actually changes the way the notes start, and so it makes it a little bit more like real people are playing it, and so it's not absolutely perfect, which frankly just sounds bad. So that's what that's all about. And again, I would not recommend messing with this too much. I think it sounds really good at its default, but again, you can see what these do to this playback, and if you're the kind of person who's really trying to dial in your playback, let us know in the comments which settings work the best for you. There's also this polyphonic instrument setting, so if you do a lot of solo piano music and you really want to tailor the MIDI playback, that's what this is all about. However, again, I don't do a lot of that, and I feel like the defaults in Dorico sound pretty darn good, so I've just left them there. The sections here, though, under dynamics that I really do change from time to time, depending on the project, is this note dynamics. The first section has to do with beat stresses. Now, it's true that in regular music, when real people play it, when we play beats, we typically will stress boom, 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 on certain beats, downbeats, the first beat of a measure, and this gives us the ability to add that natural emphasis that we normally do. You can see there's two categories, one for unpitched, aka snare drums, bass drums, cymbals, and then pitched, which would be pianos, drums, would be the trumpets, trombones, and that sort. So you can see this 0.25, that's basically 25%. So that's saying beat one of every bar, I'm going to give a 25% boost so that it has a little bit of oomph to it. And then each subsequent downbeat is going to get a 10% boost. And again, I think this sounds really natural, and I definitely would not turn it off. But you might, for your style, say you were doing something heavy metal, you might really want to put a really strong emphasis on that beat one. Chun, 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 chun. So you might want to turn that up a little bit. Also, too, new in Dorico 6, we have the ability to change the volume and note duration of articulations, which I think is fantastic. And so here is the section where I can say how much more an accent versus a marcato or a tenuto gives to our playback. So in this case, I have it set to 50% increase for accents and an 80% increase for marcatos. Tenutos add nothing to the dynamic, but ghosted notes actually bring down the dynamic by 250%. This is one that I edit every so often because sometimes I feel like it just ducks too far down and it's not quite loud enough. And so that's a way of raising that threshold up a little bit so it sounds a little more natural for your style of music. Some of these other features in playback, like glissando lines, you're probably never going to need to change this. I think that checked on is exactly what we need. The pedal markings, again, I don't do a lot of solo piano music, and the default for the pedal seems to sound okay. So you can decide whether or not you want to have a little bit more space for the person lifting their foot off the pedal and putting it back down. That's this retake length. The release length is how long it physically takes from the pedal to be fully on to fully off. And again, you might find that you need to edit these. I haven't found a need for that yet. Under repeats, this is one to me that's just about for working on a piece. I'd never use this for playback, but let's say I'm working on a piece that has a bunch of repeated sections, and I just want to hear each section once, and I don't want to go in and change anything or delete repeat signs. Well, guess what? I can literally just uncheck play repeats, and now it'll just skip over every single repeat. And if I don't want to jump to the DS or anything like that, I can uncheck it here, and now the playback will just go continuously from start to finish without changing, which is, again, it's just a nice thing when I'm editing a piece of music. Down here on the play slashes, which is turned off, this means that if I put in slash notation, that means quarter notes with the slash heads, it won't play the notes that are hidden underneath that. Sometimes I don't want to hear those notes. I just want to see it on the part, but I don't actually want to hear the playback. And so this is a nice way of kind of turning that all off so that I'm not getting any extra playback noise that I'm really not intending to hear. And so that's where that setting is. Time code is pretty self-explanatory. If I wanted to sync this playback up to the video that I'm looking at, I would obviously want to change the frame rate to 59.94 because I'm recording at 60 frames a second. The timing, this is where we get swing. Now there's a couple of these that are really important and a couple of them not so much. The first one here is the swing dialog. So let's say you really write a lot of jazz, but your swing doesn't sound quite right. If you hit the edit mode here, what you'll see is there is a dependent on tempo option, and also you can decide are you swinging eighth notes or 16th notes, and then you can see at a low tempo, say 90, it's doing only 1.5 to 1, which is 60% to the first note and 40% to the second, but at a faster tempo, I'm doing a 1-to-1. I'm not swinging at all. And that's actually pretty common practice. So this is a really great feature in Dorico because it allows us to customize the swing amount. So you can see on medium, at the low tempo, you're 2-to-1, 1, which is normal swing, and then it's 1.5 to 1 for faster tempos, and then the heavy swing is 3 to 1 and 1.5 to 1. So again, these are really great features that Dorico allows us, and then it has these predefined ones where you have just fixed swing. It doesn't matter the tempo, always play it the same. I don't use those very often because I don't think they sound as human, but I will tell you that it's great to be able to edit these swing things to make your playback sound just right. And again, remember, you can create your own. Say if you want to do David's Swing, I could go ahead and hit New, and I could call this David's Swing. And then I could do dependent tempo, and let's say my low tempo is at 96, and let's say I wanted to set this one at a pretty heavy swing, so maybe like 3.2, and then for the high tempo at say 200, I want to get this down a little farther, so let's say it's like that. And so now I can, in my document, go in and apply David's swing at any point in the piece, and it will apply that swing pattern to my eighth notes. We can also go down here under the note durations, and this is where we can change the default note duration of any quarter note. Also, the default note duration for staccato notes, staccatissimo, tenuto, and marcato. Now, I wish they had a setting here for the accents, because in my mind, I want a little separation on accented notes. So if anybody from Dorico is watching, I'd love to add that feature in here as well. But you can also do the legatos, and this is a really great thing because depending on the style of music, you may want a really legato sound, so you may want a lot of overlap, or you might not want much at all. So that's another great setting there that you can alter. And I have come in here and changed these a bit, just kind of depending, because sometimes I feel like 50% is too short for my staccatos, and I want it to be 60%. We also can do some things around repeated notes, as if somebody's playing two notes on a piano. And then there's also, again, this note positions humanization. Again, I would leave this thing on. I think it's great. I don't like changing the ends of notes. I like those cutoffs to be clean, but I do like this humanization of start position because that means everybody's not playing robotically at the same time. It sounds really great. There's some options for grace notes here. Again, if you're doing a lot of Baroque music, here's these Baroque grace notes that you can choose, as well as the appoggiatura sign. And then finally down here, there's pauses. The pauses are really fermatas and stuff like that. So the normal one here, that's your regular fermata, and it's adding 50% duration to the length of the note. And here is the length of time that it puts in for a caesura or a breath mark. So if the breath marks are adding too much space, you can go ahead and turn that down. There's also a section here to alter trills. Again, I've never changed this. Sounds fine to me, so I've gone with it. And then finally, tuning. I'm in the US, so 440 is the tuning I use. But if you need 442 or 445, that's how you could change the entire project to be up-tuned ever so slightly. Now, you heard me mention how you can access those swing features, because you'll notice that this piece not only is a straight eighth rock tune, but you'll notice by default, I have my playback set to no swing, because I hate it when I start a classical project and I realize, oh no, I don't want swing, and I don't want to have to think about that. So what you can do in Dorico is under the tempo tool, you can tell Dorico whether or not you want swing. And so if I go to a measure and I select something and I hit Shift T for tempo, that's under the right menu under Create Tempo. If you start typing one of the titles of those swing, like medium swing, you'll see that it'll put in a purple box, which is not a tempo marking. See, if I hide my signposts, that goes away, because what this is this is just a MIDI playback instruction that says, at this point, please start applying swing. So if I hit playback here, you can see that it starts swinging. And at any point, I can put in another one of these and say, here, I want to go David's swing. So when I get to that measure, it's going to actually start swinging at a different rate of swing. So you can customize the playback any way you want, and you can also get rid of the swing in the middle of your document by doing straight, which is no swing. So if you're like me and you write a lot of jazz charts, this is a way of making the playback represent exactly the way you want it to be performed, which I find to be so incredibly useful. And I'm so glad that Dorico made this so easy, because let me tell you, in Finale, it was really hard to make notes straight, and it took a lot of kind of futzing around, and you had to do hidden objects, which I've always hate hidden objects. So here in Dorico, we can do that. We can also make tempo changes just as easily. So things like Ritardandos, new literal tempo changes, we do that with the tempo tool, and Dorico will catch them on the fly. So if I want this to be fast, I can hit quarter note equal 180. And when it gets there, it will turn the tempo up. And you'll see up here in my playback, it'll change from 108. So if you want to have tempo changes in your document, it works really well. Now, there's a couple of caveats I'm going to tell you here. When using the tempo tool to write in sort of an ambiguous tempo thing like gently, Dorico automatically will associate that with some kind of tempo marking. And maybe gently to you means just a little teeny bit slower, but Dorico might change it to 90 beats a minute. And so if you don't want anything to actually affect your playback, you might want to enter those as text blocks, not as the tempo tool. But I've actually kind of gotten used to just going ahead and putting in the quarter note equal marking into the tempo block so that I know that the playback I'm hearing is representative of what I intended. And so I don't just leave it up to chance. I'll actually say a little slower, quarter note equal 90 or whatever. You can, though, however, go under the Properties tab, which is the up arrow at the bottom and this left thing over here, and you can actually hide the metronome marking. And so you can see there, let me zoom in so it's a little bigger, I can take away the quarter note equal part. So if you are going to use the tempo tool to put in something like gently, you may want to go ahead and enter in exactly what the tempo marking you want, and then you can just hide it so that you don't have to look at it while doing the performance for human beings. And this is a great way of kind of ensuring that nothing changes your tempo you weren't inadvertently looking for. Now, one great thing, but also one of my gripes, things like rallentandos, ritardandos, a tempo, all of that is found in the tempo tool. However, in band music, ritardandos go under the staff, not above. But unfortunately in Dorico, unless somebody shows me something I haven't found yet, there's no way to move this underneath the staff, which is just kind of a bummer. But it does work automatically. If you type retardando or RIT, the abbreviation, it will make your music slow down. You can also grab the outside bounding box here. So you can see this first one is where it starts, and then this is where it stops. So I can pull it out to the end of this bar here, and you'll see not only does it affect the playback from this point to this point, but it also automatically gave me the dotted line. And if you want to change its appearance, you can go ahead and hit up, and in the Properties panel, you can choose how you want it to be. Do you want it to be an abbreviation like RIT, for example? And then I go ahead and I check abbreviate, and I put in the abbreviation. You can also choose the line style. Do you want it to be a solid line? Do you want it to be dotted, or do you want it to be dashed? And so there's some different options there. You can also do the written out version where if I take away the abbreviation, you can see that it spreads the word out. Some publishers have done that for a long time. I've never really liked that look, but it is something popular. So if that's the way you want your music music to look, Dorico did give you that option, which again is fantastic. You can also specify the initial tempo. So if you want to do something crazy where it drops it down to 40 beats a minute or something like that, you can specify exactly how you want it to work. And then also this bar line interaction, it kind of gives it a tool of saying, hey, when you hit the bar line, stop or continue past a bar line. Again, those are just some different options that you have. But again, when you hit that retardando, if I was to put an a tempo here, you can hear in my playback, it will slow down and then speed back up for me. So we can see that Dorico has a lot of different options for all of these tempo tools, all of these playbacks, and the great thing is they're all tied together so that while you're doing your notation, you have access to really awesome playback features as well. So I hope you've enjoyed this video on Dorico Playback. Please subscribe to the channel, leave comments. I really love interacting with people on this stuff. I'm a pretty big computer and music nerd, so I would love to chat with you more about composition and everything else. So dump some comments down there so we can chat back and forth a little bit. If you're looking for extra help on Dorico, go to my website, larsonjazz.com. I do Zoom lessons in Dorico, and I have quite a few clients, and I help them get their music looking amazing. I also do engraving work and other things, so if you're just needing help making your symphony look amazing, I can help with all of these things. If you're a music fan, also check out some of my music, all my publications. I have lots of stuff up on various publishers as well as on my website, and my new album, Mancini 100, is out and doing awesome. So thanks so much for watching, and I hope to see you here the next time.